Constantinople, January 332 AD. 30,000 people are trapped inside the greatest arena in the Roman world. The gates are sealed. The emperor they tried to overthrow has made his decision. By nightfall, the marble seats will be soaked in blood, not from gladiators, not from war, from the city's own citizens, cut down by their own army in the place where they came to watch chariot races. But before this massacre, this was the most advanced city on Earth, a metropolis of 500,000 people, larger than anything Europe would see again for 1,000 years. A place where a peasant became emperor, a former actress became the most powerful woman alive, and 2 monks pulled off the most daring act of industrial espionage the ancient world had ever seen. I'm Arthur, and today we're reconstructing Constantinople at its absolute peak, the moment when a single city held more power, more gold, and more secrets than any city before or since. This is the story of the last Rome, the one that didn't fall. 527 AD. A man who was never supposed to rule sits on the most powerful throne on earth. Justinian I was not born into royalty. He came from a family of peasants in the Balkans, speaking Latin with a thick accent in a court that ran on Greek. His uncle, a former soldier, had seized the throne and adopted him. Now Justinian inherited it. The courtiers called him the emperor who never sleeps. He worked through the night, every night, drafting laws, interrogating ministers, and plotting a vision so ambitious it bordered on madness, to reunite the entire Roman Empire. But the real scandal was not Justinian, it was the woman beside him. Theodora was born around 497 AD, the daughter of a bear keeper at the Hippodrome. When her father died, her family was left with nothing. To survive, she was pushed onto the stage as a child, becoming an actress and performer in an era when those professions carried the legal status of prostitution. Ancient sources described theatrical acts so provocative they scandalized even Roman audiences. By 16, she had left Constantinople, abandoned by a lover in Egypt, surviving by spinning wool. When she returned, something had changed. She was magnetic, ferociously intelligent, and possessed a will that terrified everyone who encountered it. Justinian fell completely. But Roman law forbade men of senatorial rank from marrying actresses. He had to wait for his uncle's wife to die, then convince the old emperor to abolish the law entirely. In 525, they married. 2 years later, she was crowned Augusta. She demanded to be treated not as a consort, but as an equal. This was not symbolic. Theodora ran her own intelligence network, fired bishops, and openly defied her husband's religious policies. While Justinian enforced strict Orthodox doctrine, she secretly sheltered persecuted religious dissidents inside the palace itself, hiding them in rooms just steps from his throne. The court historian Procopius recorded all of this in 2 completely different versions. His official works praised the couple as God's chosen rulers, but in secret, terrified of Theodora's spies, he wrote a banned manuscript called The Secret History. In it, he claimed Justinian was not human at all. He described monks who entered the throne room and fled, claiming they saw the prince of demons in the emperor's chair. Palace guards swore they had seen Justinian wandering the corridors at night while his head vanished from his shoulders, only to reappear moments later. Were these real supernatural events? Of course not, but they reveal the sheer psychological terror that 2 outsiders on the throne inflicted on the old aristocracy. The elites could not rationalize how people from the lowest rungs of society were reshaping the world, so they turned them into demons. But to understand what Justinian and Theodora were reshaping, you first have to see the stage itself, a city engineered to be indestructible. Imagine arriving by sea around 530 AD. The first thing you see is the walls. 3 concentric rings of fortification across the western approach, a deep moat, a lower outer wall, and the inner wall, a colossal barrier studded with massive towers. These are the Theodosian Walls, built between 405 and 413 AD, the most formidable defensive system in European history. Their secret is in the mortar. Alternating layers of limestone and horizontal bands of red Roman brick, bonded with elastic cement that lets the walls flex during earthquakes rather than shatter. For 1,000 years, no army on earth will breach them. Behind those walls lives a city of 500,000. Rome itself has collapsed to a few tens of thousands. London is a village. Paris barely exists. Constantinople is not just the largest city in Europe, it is the only real city left. Its spine is the Mese, a ceremonial avenue 25 meters wide, lined with covered colonnades sheltering shops and merchants. Twice a week, the street transforms into a theater. Imperial processions, military triumphs, and religious parades flood the avenue with incense, drums, chanting priests, and crowds so dense that the air fills with the scent of roses thrown to mask the crush of humanity. The Mese runs from the Million, the golden milestone from which every distance in the empire is measured, through the circular forum of Constantine, dominated by a column of Egyptian porphyry topped with the founding emperor dressed as Apollo, and onward to the Forum of Theodosius, the city's largest civic space, modeled on Trajan's Forum in Old Rome, with its own triumphal arch and spiral column. But the real miracle is underground. Constantinople has no major rivers. To keep 500,000 people alive, engineers built the longest aqueduct network in the ancient world, over 550 kilometers of channels carrying water from Thrace, more than 120 kilometers away. Because this city was built to survive sieges, that water had to be stored inside the walls. Archaeologists have mapped over 200 cisterns beneath the streets. The greatest is the Basilica Cistern, built under Justinian. Picture a subterranean cathedral, 138 meters long, its ceiling held up by 336 marble columns, each 9 meters tall, recycled from ruined pagan temples across the empire. In the far corner, 2 columns rest on enormous carved heads of the Gorgon Medusa, one sideways, one upside down. Were the engineers simply using blocks that happened to be the right height? Probably. But the people of Constantinople whispered something else. They said the builders turned the Gorgon's face away to trap the ancient curse beneath the weight of a Christian city. Constantinople could survive earthquakes, blockades, and barbarian armies, but it could not survive its own people. And in January 532, the city tore itself apart.
To understand what happened, you need to understand the Hippodrome. Connected to the imperial palace by a private corridor, this U-shaped arena stretched over 400 meters and held up to 100,000 spectators. Chariot racing here was not a sport, it was a religion. The city was split between 2 factions, the Blues and the Greens. These were not fan clubs, they were power structures that divided society from top to bottom. The Blues drew support from the landed aristocracy and the Orthodox establishment, backed directly by Justinian. The Greens attracted merchants, artisans, and the monophysite religious minority who believed Christ had one divine nature rather than 2. This was not trivial theology. Egypt and Syria, the empire's richest provinces, were fiercely monophysite. Alienate them, and you lose a third of the tax revenue. Beyond politics, the factions operated like armed territorial gangs. Walking into the wrong neighborhood meant a beating or worse. Fans dressed in faction colors, styled their hair in tribal patterns, and buried lead curse tablets in the racetrack to hex rival horses. In 501 AD, green militiamen ambushed blues inside the arena, leaving 3,000 dead. By January 32, 532, Justinian's tax collectors had squeezed the city dry. When two condemned rioters miraculously survived their hangings and the emperor refused to pardon them, the two factions that had spent decades trying to destroy each other united. On January 13th, a deafening chant erupted from both sides of the hippodrome. Nika, Nika, conquer. What began as protest became 5 days of chaos. Mobs torched the center of Constantinople. Hagia Sophia burned. The Senate burned. The rioters crowned a replacement emperor. Justinian loaded treasure onto ships and prepared to flee. That is when Theodora stood up in the war council. While the generals argued for escape, she told them she would rather die an empress than live as a fugitive. The royal purple, she said, was the noblest burial shroud. Justinian stayed. He sent Narses into the hippodrome with bags of gold to divide the blue leadership. Then he unleashed Belisarius and Mundus with mercenary troops. The gates were blocked. The order was total. Ancient sources claim that by nightfall, 30,000 unarmed citizens lay on the marble. Modern historians consider the number exaggerated, but even conservative estimates place the toll in the tens of thousands. Justinian's grip on power was absolute. The revolt left Constantinople in ashes, but Justinian did not see ruins. He saw a blank canvas, and on it, he would build something the world had never seen.
On the ashes of the old basilica, Justinian launched the most ambitious construction project since the pyramids. He did not hire architects, he hired mathematicians. Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus were geometers, physicists who thought in abstract curves and load calculations. The problem Justinian gave them was considered impossible. Place a massive circular dome on a rectangular building without filling the interior with support columns. Their solution was revolutionary. They perfected pendentives, enormous concave triangular structures that transferred the dome's weight onto 4 hidden corner piers, channeling the load downward through cascading semi-domes. The result was an interior so vast that visitors felt they were standing inside a hollow mountain. 10,000 workers in competitive teams of 100 raised the building in 5 years, 10 months, and 4 days. The structure stretches 81 meters long by 73 meters wide. The central dome spans 31 meters and soars nearly 50 meters above the floor. The largest enclosed interior space on Earth, a record that would stand for almost 1,000 years until the Cathedral of Florence. 40 windows cut into the dome's base created a ring of light that made the structure appear weightless, as if suspended from heaven by an invisible chain. The interior blazed with polychromed marble, sawn thin as fabric, gold mosaic on every vault, and an altar reportedly cast from gold, alloyed with sapphires and crushed pearls, lit by hundreds of solid gold lamps weighing 40 pounds each. On the day of inauguration in 537, Justinian walked to the central marble disc, the Omphalion, the navel of the earth, and declared, "Solomon, I have surpassed you." But ambition had outrun physics. The original dome was too flat, pushing its weight outward. After earthquakes in 553 and 557, it collapsed. Isidore the Younger rebuilt it higher and steeper, adding 40 structural ribs. The new dome held. It still holds today.
Hagia Sophia proved Constantinople could build miracles. But a city of 500,000 does not survive on miracles. It survives on bread, gold, and a secret ingredient from the other side of the world. Step outside Hagia Sophia, and the contrast hits immediately. Marble mansions sit wall to wall with cramped tenements where artisans share communal ovens. Constantinople is a city of extremes, and nowhere is that clearer than in what people eat. The poor survive on state-subsidized Egyptian grain, 80,000 rations of bread distributed every day by the imperial government. Their diet is barley bread, garlic, onions, and thick porridge cooked in communal pots. But they have one ingenious invention, tarhana, a fermented paste of yogurt, wheat, and herbs dried in the sun that can be stored for months and boiled into soup in winter. On the streets, vendors sell simiti, sesame-crusted bread rings, the original fast food for workers on the move. You can buy proto-kebabs, bread stuffed with fried lamb liver, raw onions, and white beans. There are cheese pastries made with sheep butter, roasted chickpeas, and blocks of pastelli, a crunchy bar of toasted sesame and honey. And everywhere, the inescapable smell of garum, a pungent fermented fish sauce inherited from Rome that Byzantines pour on practically everything. The wealthy eat from a different world entirely. Oysters from the Aegean, roasted tuna from the Bosphorus, wild boar seasoned with black pepper from India, cinnamon, saffron, and ginger hauled across thousands of miles on the Silk Road. They drink sweet wine from Chios and drench their food in ono garum, a kind of ancient ketchup. But the true currency of status is fabric. Imperial law dictates what each class can wear, and one color is reserved for the emperor under penalty of death: Tyrian purple, extracted from the glands of hundreds of thousands of sea snails. The fabric that carries it is silk, and all of it came from China, routed through the Persian Empire, which controlled every Silk Road checkpoint and charged tariffs that bled the treasury directly into the enemy's war chest. Around 550 AD, Justinian found a solution. It was theft on a civilizational scale. He recruited 2 Nestorian monks who had traveled through Central Asia and China. They brought intelligence that shattered a myth. Silk was not harvested from enchanted trees. It was produced by a caterpillar, the silkworm Bombyx mori, feeding on mulberry leaves. Funded by the emperor, the monks traveled back east. They packed thousands of silkworm eggs inside the hollow cores of their bamboo walking sticks, sealed with wax. For years, they crossed Persian-controlled territory, passed customs inspections, carrying the most valuable biological cargo in history hidden inside their canes. Around 552, they arrived. The eggs hatched. Mulberry trees were planted across Greece. Imperial silk factories sprang up in Tyre, Beirut, Antioch, and Constantinople, guarded by the military. The Persian monopoly was broken forever. This single act of espionage would finance the empire for 8 more centuries. And the empire needed every coin. The gold solidus, minted at 72 coins per Roman pound of pure gold, each weighing 4.5 grams of 24-karat gold, is the most trusted currency on Earth. Archaeologists have found Justinian's coins in graves in England, in Indian ports where merchants sewed them onto clothing, and in tombs along the Silk Road inside China. It was the dollar of the ancient world.
Constantinople had conquered its greatest weakness. It had Hagia Sophia, it had invincible walls, it had the most powerful currency on earth. But years before the monks ever returned, something had already gone wrong. In 536, the sun disappeared.
In 536, something catastrophic happened to the sky. A massive volcanic eruption, probably in Iceland or Central America, threw enough ash into the atmosphere to block the sun across the entire northern hemisphere for 18 months. Procopius wrote that the sun gave off its light without brightness, like the moon, for an entire year. Temperatures plummeted. Snow fell in summer across the Mediterranean. Crops withered in the fields. Famine spread from Mesopotamia to Ireland. And the immune systems of millions of people, weakened by months of cold and hunger, quietly collapsed, leaving entire populations defenseless against whatever came next. 5 years later, the killing blow arrived on a grain ship from Egypt, carried by fleas on rats nesting in the wheat that fed the city. The first recorded pandemic of bubonic plague, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, entered Constantinople through its own food supply. Procopius and John of Ephesus describe patients struck with fever and disorientation. Then the dreaded buboes, swollen lymph nodes the size of small apples in the groin, armpits, and behind the ears. When the bacteria reached the bloodstream, the tissue turned black. Most died within 5 days. At its peak, the plague took 5,000 lives a day. The capacity to bury the dead collapsed. Justinian created emergency squads to haul bodies into mass graves. When those filled, the government tore roofs off defensive towers in the city walls and packed them with decomposing corpses before sealing them shut. The stench hung over the capital for months. The emperor himself fell ill. Theodora seized absolute control, ruling alone and crushing any hint of conspiracy. Justinian survived, deepening rumors of inhuman pacts, but the empire was fatally wounded. Before the plague, Justinian's armies had been reshaping the Mediterranean. Belisarius conquered the Vandal kingdom in North Africa in barely a year with 15,000 men. In Italy, the Gothic War dragged on for 2 decades until the eunuch general Narses, a 70-year-old bureaucrat with no battlefield experience but unlimited funding, crushed the Ostrogothic king Totila at Taginae in 552. 8,000 archers, hidden in a crescent formation, annihilated the Gothic cavalry before it reached the center. 6,000 warriors and their king lay dead by sunset. Italy was Roman again. But the plague made it all unsustainable. Between 25 and 50 million people perished across the Mediterranean world, roughly a third of the known population. The army could not be replenished, the tax base evaporated. The dream of a restored Roman Empire, which had seemed unstoppable after Africa and Italy, was finished. Yet the most enduring legacy was not stone or steel, it was parchment. In 528, Justinian tasked his corrupt but brilliant minister Tribonian with organizing 1,000 years of contradictory Roman law into a single code. 10 jurists and 39 clerks devoured 3 million lines across 2,000 scrolls and distilled them into the Corpus Juris Civilis: property, contracts, criminal justice, the rights of women and children, unified under one framework. The code was forgotten for centuries, buried in monastery libraries. Then, in the 11th century, scholars in Bologna rediscovered it. Today, the civil law systems of France, Germany, Spain, Latin America, Japan, and dozens of nations trace their roots to a document commissioned by a peasant emperor in Constantinople 1,500 years ago.
Hagia Sophia still stands. For nearly 1,000 years after Justinian, it remained the largest enclosed interior space on Earth. The Corpus Juris Civilis still governs.
Its principles live in the legal codes of every country from France to Argentina to Japan. And somewhere in a museum collection, you can hold a gold solidus with Justinian's face, a coin so perfectly struck it was accepted from England to China. Constantinople proved that a peasant and an actress could reshape the world, that walls can hold back armies but not disease, that the greatest empire on earth can be saved by one woman's speech and undone by a flea. Rome fell, Constantinople endured, and the ideas it forged in law, in architecture, in the sheer audacity of what a single city can become, are still holding up the world. The walls of Constantinople held back armies for 1,000 years, but our time here is up. If you want to walk the streets of more lost empires before they turn to dust, make sure to subscribe. Drop a comment below and let me know which ancient city should we reconstruct next. See you on the next journey.
Before we finish, I want to take a moment to recognize the people appearing on screen right now. To the members of this channel, thank you so much. Your ongoing support is what motivates me and helps keep this project alive. If you enjoy what we do here and would like to directly support the channel, I invite you to click the Join button down below. To our members and to everyone who is simply watching this video, thank you for your time.